Ashleigh, who are you? What does your company do? And what's the problem that you solve?
Oh, hi, Cormac. So yeah, my name is Ashleigh Gwilliam. I'm Director of Insurance here at nCino, but we're probably best known as FullCircl. It was a company founded founded about 18, 19 years ago. Originally, it was called Artesian, and I joined back in 2019. I'd been a client of the company before that. We merged with a company called Deal back in 2022, and that's when we rebranded the company into FullCircl. And the view was because that we're the only company that gives a 360-degree view of everything you need to know about companies. We then got acquired by nCino back in October 2024. I run the insurance division where we work with over 90% of the broker market, helping them start smarter, grow faster with compliance solve. We give insurance professionals the data intelligence they need to win business, assess risk, and stay compliant without all the manual grind involved. We actually work with all the major banks as well. So Lloyds, NatWest, HSBC, Metro, various others. And my team's growth is predominantly now on the underwriting MGA space. And we've got high focus from there with our smart underwriter services and APIs, providing that digital triage, reducing time spent to turn around submissions by about 80%, basically, at a high level.
Yeah, nice. So what's the landscape like before nCino and FullCircl? Like, how did the insurance brokers, MGAs, agents manage all of this?
So I think, companies were sort of flying a bit blind. They're relying on outdated information, manual research, and fragmented data sources. So while numerous providers existed, providing just a piece of the puzzle, some focused on the news, others financials, some on compliance, no company was providing the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our mission. So as I mentioned, we provide that 360-degree view of an organization, allowing you to understand everything you need to know in one simple view. So, that's why we chose the name FullCircl. So as I mentioned, when I joined back in 2019, I was actually a client and a user of the service. I was actually a client and user of both Deal and Artesian, because again, they were both doing a bit of the service. And the Artesian service at the time was heavily banking focused, and I was brought in to tailor that service for the insurance industry. While we'd had great success from banking and some insurance clients, we wanted to move away from that broad financial services offering and have a tailored product for insurance, banking, telecoms, and others, and providing that unique service to each vertical. So for us, that led to the launch of our smart products. So while Smart Banker assists with AML and KYC and driving growth, Smart Broker looks at the world through those different eyes and looks at, while something might be a risk to a bank, for example, falling turnover, this could be a sales trigger for insurance for premium finance or trade credit or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we've always looked at each requires sort of a different mindset, a different rule set, a sort of different world view. Rather than surfacing vast amounts of data to companies, we would hide, which is what our peers in the market was doing before. You could get so many feeds of just all this data, and trust me, too much data can be worse than no data at all. What we would do is highlight the top 10 things you need to know, particularly to brokers, so we'd help them monitor the company's advice and any changes that would happen to those businesses. As a result, brokers that use our service grew GWP 140% faster on average than those that don't. Then we've got our smart, so that was our smart broker service. Our smart underwriter service is different still. But underwriters prior to using us are drowning in submissions. There's no efficient way to triage or digitally enrich the data that's coming through. I think many people know that insurance underwriters get more submissions than they can actually deal with.
Mm-hmm.
They can never get around to getting the right ones. So what we work on is that digital triage where we can automatically highlight which submissions you can decline before you waste time on them. We can highlight the gaps in submissions so you can go back to the broker very quickly and file that. And we showed that the time saving was over 80%, improving underwriting relationships with brokers and helping them win more business in comparison to their peers. We also did other bespoking for banks and telecoms and various others, helping drive acquisition many more, but my personal focus on the insurance sector there.
Nice. Okay. So lots of different benefits, lots of different ways to enter into these businesses, I imagine. So what is the sales motion? How are you having these first conversations to sell your full suite?
It's a great question. I think the key for us is we really lead on industry specialism. I mentioned earlier we don't really have full competitors in our space because no one covers the full 360 view. But when we are competing against those that operate in part of the space that we do, is that deeper industry insights and understanding. So we're the only data provider that is recommended and approved and promoted by BIBA, the British Insurance Broking Association. And we work very closely with them to understand what's going on in the industry and what's going on with their clients. I mean, I myself sit on 2 committees for them, their Information and Technology Advisory Council and the West Midlands BIBA committee there. I'm also proud of the fact that we're actually key supporters of the Insurance Cultural Awareness Network. I wanted to cast AJ, actually. AJ, who runs that, he doesn't live too far from me, and he's a personal friend, and the work him and his team do is incredible at promoting the insurance industry to people of diverse backgrounds. And that's the real key for us. We're embedded in the ecosystem that we serve. We're involved in the sectors, but not only do we understand them, but we influence them and we are influenced by them. And you can't put a price on that level of in-depth connectivity.
So it's does that mean that you are completely like just busy with the inbound stuff? Do you have to go outbound still to get new business?
It's a combination of the two. I think the team are always out there in the industry and they're out and about. And it comes pretty naturally that a lot of businesses will come to us because we're naturally just in their ecosystem. We're there, and they know who we are. We're recommended by their peers. But we do a lot of outreach. We have a BDG team that will focus, but it's a lot of an easier conversation. It's never a cold call.
Yeah.
They're already aware who we are. They're already aware of what we do. They've probably met some before, and it's more of that follow-up on stuff like that. But if you're looking for more of a technical response about how we work, it's probably more, we sort of win by differentiation. As I mentioned a couple of times, we only can be providing that 360-degree view. We don't really have competitors. And I use the term competitors in the loosest sense of the world because none of them have that industry focus that we do. And this comes from the passion. I was an insurance broker for 14 years. I've been in the industry for 21. Yeah. Very passionate about the sector, very passionate about the industry. Regularly attend careers fairs and events at schools as promoting insurance career choice. 3 of my godchildren are actually working in insurance now, and I'm actively encouraging my nieces to do the same. But even with that level of industry involvement, we still face difficulties. I think, the biggest challenge comes from not competing softwares, but more that apathy. We've been doing things this way for decades. What should we change? That sort of statement you get from companies.
Yeah.
And the key for us is how we demonstrate that huge levels of ROI. So we've tried and tested. We have a tried and tested process for is the pilots that we actually run. And I think that's how we make sure deals actually close. We've a dedicated pre-sales team that provides structured pilots, access to our service during a 4-week program that focuses on showing how you can get ROI from our platform and helping extrapolate that across the year. We're answering questions like, where have we helped you sell more and increase revenue during this pilot process? What compliance risks were you exposed to that we can minimize? How can we help you do all that faster? And that for us feeds back into an overarching sales process tied up in MedPicker. Many people across Medic, we take that hard and we focus on MedPicker. So we look at them, whilst looking at the standard metrics in buyer decision criteria, decision process. We then pull in like paper process, then back to identify pain and champion, competition and risk. And I think a lot of standard people look at MedPick don't do those eggs. And that's key structure to our sales process, the use of MedPicker and that pilot process there, basically.
Okay, nice. No, I like it. It's clearly battle tested across like quite a few years to say the least. So, okay, what's a sales or growth mistake that you made early on that you've learned from?
So I actually, when I was preparing for the session, I've got 2 stories on this front. One's quite a funny story and one's a bit more serious.
Yeah.
So the funny story is, before I worked in tech, I mentioned I worked in insurance. But before I worked in insurance, I used to sell playgrounds.
Okay.
So I had this great idea to advertise our company on Rubik's Cubes to give out at the annual Play conference. We were the safety surfacing company. We were selling to the playground companies. And I thought if you stuck it on Rubik's Cubes, it's fun, it's play, it's in line with the industry. It was great. It was a massive mistake because the problem with Rubik's Cubes is once you've messed them up, you can't read the information on the side. I actually went and found one at the weekend. So as you can see, you can't tell which company that's advertising at all. Because it's messed up. And it was in my head, it was one of the greatest ideas I'd ever had, but it was an utter disaster because you can't tell it's advertising. So maybe you learn lessons that of actually thinking things through and not just going, brilliant and taking that idea. I think on a more serious comment, I think, and that is slightly linked to that, it's arrogance. I think a lot of people working in sales go through a similar process. I think good salespeople excel very early on in their career, often to natural talent, and they succeed quite well. But then as results as they are a result, they don't tend to learn sales processes more effectively, and they don't really realize that if they start losing out on big deals due to poor qualification, and that's when they start learning. And I think every salesperson I've known has gone through a similar process, like the Rubik's Cube, where it's a great idea, but they don't qualify it properly. They don't learn from their mistakes. Everything's just gone well. And then that's when people later on their line, they learn that they need to start actually understanding sales processes and not relying on that natural talent. And I think for me, there's no better for qualification tool than MedPicker. And I think that's how you know your deals are on track. That's how you know what you're doing. I mean, early in my career, I never used anything like that. I may have looked at things like Challenger or other sort of conversational models, but they're not qualification models. And I think good salespeople learn to use those qualification models better. But earlier in their career, you close a few deals because people like you. You've got a nice smile and you can charm your way through. It's later on that when you get those bigger deals and you start losing out. So anyone starting out in their career, if you learn that process sooner and quicker, would really help. And that's how it plans out.
Yeah, nice. Okay. And then is there any hires or any like sales training team related issues? Because that's been a big challenge since people have moved more remote. So is there anything on the hires that you've learned in the sales process?
I mean, I'm a big believer in looking at diverse sources of talent. Some of the best people I've got working for me now or had working with me in the past have not come from traditional backgrounds for sales routes like you'd expect. It's not other tech people. So recruiting people from, who used to, there's someone that works for us that used to work in a Disney store. That's just incredible because they have that natural ability to learn to people. But you are right. It's off that. It's not then hiring those people and then just going off you go and fill your boots. It's making sure you have that embedded with them. And at nCino, we have a sales excellency program. And at FullCircl, we had a similar process where it was investing a lot of time in that internal training. And whether that is looking at MedPicker and focusing on, you could spend out a whole session focusing on just uncovering metrics, but it's also looking at other abilities like SkyPab or Challenger or Spin and actually making sure that you invest in that talent. And I think, again, I was too late in my career before I started looking at all the acronyms and learning all the different ones. I wish I'd picked them up sooner. And I think that's something that, as a result of me not picking up too late when I'm working with new starters, I'm very insistent on embedding. It was so Andrew Yates, who was one of the founders of Artesian back in the day. When I first met him, he was so passionate about Medic and Spin, and I thought this is too much. It you don't need to be that structured on your deals. And over the years, every time that we've had a gap in Medic Spin or something like that, he's been proven right that when you've got that gap, the deal doesn't close as well. So I wish I was less arrogant early in my career and learned that more. And I instill that in the people I work with now, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, fine. So I've had some, I guess, would it be bugbears or I've seen a lot of people pushing all the different sales qualifications on LinkedIn massively. The stance on it is I definitely agree like that you need to have, probably lean more on traditionally, like as a because it generalizes a lot of them. But what I found is my advice to people tends to be that they're trying to get them too early. So like they're just in a first conversation, they're just like then leaning too much on the qualification, whether it is MedPicker or a medic or band. It then becomes like a interview style, like they're just asking the questions, which is where my bugbear comes from with the qualification. Whereas I think it needs to be like a back end framework, like it's something that you're not just rattling through is this person that my decision maker, do they have the economic power, like all of that kind of thing. So yeah, what do you see the same in like?
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
MedPicker's not a script. It's the framework in the background. You're right. And if you if you sit there and look, I started my insurance career before in tech in personal lines car insurance, personalized van and home, and and that is very much a script because you've got to be FCA compliant and you've got to go, what is the value of the car? What is this?
Yeah.
When you move into complex deals, particularly even on insurance, when you're looking at commercial risk and stuff like that, there's an element of that, but that more free-flowing conversation is so vital. Relationship building is key. But actually, where you can do a lot of this is before the meetings even happened. And I think that's where a lot of salespeople are lacking. I think there's, something I got drummed into me when I was an insurance broker was, if you look at a set of company accounts, they have a section called strategic report. And under there is a bit that says strategic risks and priorities. And that's that company telling you what it thinks the biggest risks are to its business and what its biggest problems it's facing are. Now, by reading that, you can often learn where their business mindset's going. And that can be in your initial outreach. Insurance term, for example, I live in Solihull, Jaguar Land Rover, massive in Solihull.
Yeah.
Before, a year ago, BMW was saying the biggest risk to their business was supply chain disruption. Jaguar Land Rover has a massive cyber attack. Now BMW is saying the biggest risk to their business is cyber insurance and cyber attacks. Yeah. So if you're going in and talking to BMW about supply chain, you're not selling them something that they care about. You should be going and talking about security and cyber and stuff like that and something linked to that, because that's the biggest problem they're facing. And you can learn that just by 5 minutes having a look at their annual accounts. And that can apply. Some companies are going to say, we sell mainly to insurance brokers, underwriters. The insurance market is softening. The insurance market is softening. So you should be looking at, they're going to be looking at increasing client count or GWP and selling more to client. And some are going to be looking at GWP, some are looking at client count, some are going to be looking at ratio of policies to client. You can often find that out before you even go into the meeting. So your first meeting can be more casual. You sort of know where the conversation's going. But yeah, I do agree. If you're meeting someone at a networking event, what's the pain that you're facing? Tell me the pain. You put them off straight away. Yeah, you've got to build up to it, definitely. I completely agree.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So, and then what are your thoughts if so say you've been following type medic processes for 10 years or MedPicker or any of them, and you've been following it type, will you always keep that? Will you always have that like framework, like that you're ticking the boxes behind the scenes, or does it ever get to the point where it's just natural and you don't need to tick it? Or would you always recommend ticking, like manually, like going through a checklist, to whether that's on the CRM, on a notepad, whatever way?
I think, to go to something that you touched upon there, I think, first of all, it doesn't matter which framework you use, find one that you're comfortable with. I personally MedPicker, but if it is BAN or others that you're comfortable with, make sure you've just got one. I think it's very easy to go, I'm doing a really good job at this. I don't need to have a checklist in the background because I know what I'm doing. Because, okay, build yourself up, you'll stay at that level. But gradually over time, it will just fade off. And just back to the arrogance thing I said, but again, it's that checklist. But it's also one of the best ways to, if you're speaking to a salesperson, speaking to your sales leader or something like that, and you can show them that this is all structured and framed, it's a great way of giving them confidence in what you're doing. It's a great way of, when they have to report to more senior staff, to go, actually, I know what Cormac's doing is great because he's got, I can see it. And that, even that's just a bullet point of metrics are this, pain is this, blah, 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 bang, done, 5-minute thing. It's such a great way of having that structure and having that framework in place. So I think you should always maintain. And when I speak to people that I'm working with on accounts, or if I'm pulled into a deal at a later stage, the first thing I want to know is what's the structure. Let's go through the medic, the BAM, whatever you can look at. Let's go.
Yeah.
That way I'm instantly up to speed on where we are.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That makes complete sense. Okay. What about a metric in sales that a lot of people track that you believe that they shouldn't?
So I don't think there's incorrect metrics overall. It's more about what's going on at the time. And I think, I work predominantly in the insurance sector, and I think you can look at what's going on in that industry at the moment, and it really helps. The insurance sector's just come out of a hard market. Now, during that hard market, everyone's gross written premium, GWP, has increased massively. So loads of companies looked amazing on paper. And if they were tracking only GWP during that period of time, they're going to look amazing. But realistically, because everyone's premium's going up as a natural state of the market, they should have been looking at client count. And they should be looking at, okay, yes, we're growing as a business because all our clients are spending more on their premiums. But actually, are we losing clients during this period of time? Where is our long-term strategy? And now we've got into a more soft market and premiums are coming down. Those companies that only focused on growing GWP and didn't focus on client count are now finding that there's a hole in the bucket and they're panicking. So that's the time when they need to be looking in a soft market. You do look at GWP being more prevalent, and you look at growing that GWP rather than anything else. So I don't think there's never wrong metrics. There's just wrong metrics for the circumstance. And that could be, if you're speaking to a client, for example, whose biggest pain is growing GWP, and you're telling them how much time you can save them, well, that's completely irrelevant. No one cares. It's finding the metric. It's understanding the situation and aligning the metric to the situation. I don't think there's ever there's no universal wrong metric. There's just a wrong metric for the situation.
Yeah. Okay, cool. No, that makes sense. Can we go into a bit of a quick fire round? So I'll try and not ask you a question off the back of your answers.
Okay, I'll try and keep my answers short for a change.
Yeah, cool. No, sounds good. So a book or a podcast that's changed how you think?
So there's two, I suppose, if I'm going to answer quickly. Both came up recently. I've just done a master's degree in business standards, and both come from that. The first is Nudge by Thaler and Sunstein, which is a fantastic study into choice architecture, focusing on libertarian paternalism and cognitive biases. Focus predominantly on people encouraged to make the right choice by the options presented. So, for example, making organ donation an opt-out rather than an option. And there's numerous sales applications and that sort of for consumer. Don't lose £500 worth of savings is better than you could save £500,000, whatever it is, like that. And the second one's not really sales organized, but it's personal for me. It's Cannibals But With Forks by John Elkington. So it's heavily focused on sustainability, the principles of people, planet, and profit being key pillars to business longevity, and how all three are interconnected.
Nice. Okay. Favorite sales tool or founder tool?
Sales tool, rather than thinking, slightly out of the box, as Roland talking about CRM tools and intelligence tools, I believe the best weapon for any salesperson is Skype. It's like sometimes referred to the 60-second meeting, where you structure on situation, complication, implication, position, action, and benefit. And if you can frame your proposition into a sentence per each of those and deliver that in 60 seconds, then that's the best way to grab any senior exec's attention to your proposition. I also think if you can't summarize your position in 60 seconds, then you have no deal. So.
Yep. Cool. Underrated go-to-market channel?
I think I've touched upon this. I'm an old school networker, and I believe that's the way forward. I believe people buy from people. Getting in your face, getting your face out there is the real key. What I like I mentioned we do with BIBA and ICANN, just being involved and out there. I think so many people don't forget about, and particularly after COVID, people just stopped doing that and focused on emails, and that's the key. Face to face, get out and about in front of people. I think it's become a neglected channel these days.
Nice. Okay. And finally, a founder or sales leader that you really admire?
So I think for me, I focus on, there's two angles I have on this, and actually my mindset these days is very much on sustainability and how businesses produce longevity. I mentioned AJ Mystery, who's the founder of ICANN. He's a friend of mine. The work they do to promote diverse talent within the insurance industry is so key for the future of the whole industry, and not just what he knows. He's also one of the best networkers I know actually as well, which is so key. But on a more global scale, on someone more famous, Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, the clothing brand. They built a $1 billion business, proving that providing sustainability wasn't a trade-off to that. There's a quote from her that's, when we make a decision, it's because it's the right thing to do for the planet, but it also ends up being good for the business. So he gave away his entire company to fight climate change. Not sold, he gave it away. And he's famous for telling his customers not to buy his product unless they needed them. That view of the longevity, and this brand's global now, it's huge. That view of, if you do the right thing for the planet, for your clients, for your customers, the business will grow naturally. That message from Yvon, that's just amazing. And I think that's really key to anything.
Nice. Perfect. Well, yeah, Ashleigh, that's the pod. So thanks for coming on. Where should people connect with you, or where should they reach out?
Best thing to do for me is LinkedIn, always. My name's quite unique spelt. So if you look me up on LinkedIn, I pretty much come up. But yeah, that's the best way. Or you can reach out to me at my nCino email address. I'm always happy for people to reach out. So it's just ashleigh.gwilliam@nCino.com. But LinkedIn's normally the best way to reach out to me. I'm quite responsive on LinkedIn. So yeah.
Cool. Perfect. Well, I'll put the links in the description so people can just reach straight out. And then, yeah, that's it. So yeah, thanks again for coming on. It's been great.
Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, cool, mate.